Build it and he will come. I am in a field in Iowa. Yeah. However, there's a good reason for me to be here, because what we have next to me is the only operating Humber Mark IV in North America. And worldwide, I'm told it is the best restored inside and out anywhere to be found in the world. It is owned by 3 blokes named Ryan, Chris and Dave. The reenactors, which is why they have it, but they were nice enough to allow me to come down, crawl over the Humber and have a look at it. So the story of the Humber goes back actually to the Guy days, G-U-Y, and they had come up with a design for an armoured car, very serviceable, they were very happy with it. The problem was that they couldn't make enough. So enter the Humber company, and more accurately Roots, and said, look, we can take your armoured car chassis body and we can mount it onto one of our chassis and we'll get you a serviceable armoured car in sufficient numbers. So they did. This was the Humber Mark I. Basically, it's a Humber body, a Humber chassis, Guy body. Humber Mark II, they play around with the front end, with the hatches. Mark III, you're now talking about a 50mm machine gun armed 3-man turret. The important thing was the 3-man turret. He had a radio that for the 3rd man. That was his main function, was just to man the radio. Because hey, it's a scout car, armoured car. And then the Mark IV comes along. They decide to give it a proper gun. At least proper by armoured car standards. Now remember, the guy was originally a wheeled tank. It's a bit like the AEC, was originally developed as a wheeled tank that we saw before. But they have a reprioritization of things. So this is an armoured car, but they do have a cannon. And the cannon in question is not the 2-pounder that you might expect. It is the American 37mm. But it's all good, because all the Stuarts coming on, you have the 37mm ammunition anyway, so no harm done. And this now brings us to the Humber, and as we go around, the only thing I will caution you that is really different to the way the vehicle would have been in service is underneath they don't have a lot of the armor plate. It was thin armor plate, just supposed to protect against anti-personnel mines more than anything else. But as a serviceable vehicle, not likely to run over anti-personnel mines of any great significance in the reenactment field. There's argument to be said for simply leaving the armor plate off in the bottom so you can access everything. But other than that, this is like 95%, if not better, original configuration. So it was restored actually by a different crowd entirely, and they did a wonderful job, but let's not go into the details. And so on with the tour. Like most people, I know a lot more about Shermans and Panthers than I do about British armoured cars. So we're going on a voyage of discovery. But again, that's one of the beautiful things about having restored vehicles available to us to crawl over and look at, because we learn so much just by physically being at a vehicle. I've mentioned this before. You look at something and say, well, why did they do that? Or why do those screws exist? And you have to think about the design process of the vehicle, and it gets us where we're going. So anyway, like the typical British numbering system, it's got a Fox registration, which means armoured car or armoured scout car, and then the vehicle serial number. Underneath the name of this vehicle, the original name of the vehicle was Vandal. So that is still here underneath the rocket box. Piece of wood for unditching, because of course this is a wheeled vehicle now. If you really want to make a good off-road vehicle, you go the whole hog with 4-wheel independent suspension. You look at the Daimlers. Even the original guys also had independent suspension. They've made the Humber a lot simpler, which has its good points. Also means you're more likely to have off-road problems. Hence some of the unditching assistance. The wing mirrors are concave, so they give you a very broad view as to what's around you. But again, objects in the rear view mirror may be closer than they appear. Lifting eyes on the top, you're also going to see a couple of mounts for towing clevises, should you add them. The blackout drive is on the right, and it's actually a removable flap or liftable flap. They can lift up out of the way, and you actually have something akin to a service drive light underneath. Above is the simple slit with the shade. Side lights, armor at the front. I mean, it's not barely a ½ inch. Not a heck of a lot to it for a wheeled tank. And well, we'll talk about the driver's hatch a little bit later. All of the stowage panniers and bins have a one-way lock, shall we say. This lock has to be counter to gravity, put in the right position, and you should be able to pull out the latch and lift up. And as this is an operating serviceable vehicle, they have all the stuff that they need to keep this thing running around in the fields. They've been to all sorts of reenactment places, and of course the season is only just beginning. I'm recording this in April. So quick look at the front right wheel, because that's where the steering mechanism is. This shroud protects a steering shaft which comes back here to the right wheel, and there is a crossbar, a tie rod, whatever you call the thing, which connects this wheel to the far one, so that as this one turns, the other one turns accordingly. Although it does seem to indicate that, unless it's very cleverly designed and I can't figure it out, when you turn the wheels turn the same way. It's not like a differentiated level of steering. Leaf springs on all four corners, and as you can see, it is a solid axle. Goes all the way across. You got your differentials in the middle, obviously, which of course will affect your ground clearance. But this is all about rugged simplicity, easy manufacture, easy maintenance, more than it is off-road capability. So that's always that balance that you have to strike. On the left-hand side, obviously, we have our little horn. Now, you'll see that these cables just go right through the paneling, and they're exposed cables on the inside. They are kind of tied in place, and then they feed into the hull. The wheels themselves, 10.5 by 20. Now, these are split rim, but I'm told they are not the Widowmakers, which is presumably why we don't have the red markings on the wheels. Now, I have to go back to the AEC. I misidentified the red markings as counter thread. So a lot of vehicles you have right to tighten on one side and left to tighten on the other, because that was the way the vehicles were designed. But the red markings were contrary to what I had said. Don't touch these unless you're a mechanic who knows what he's doing. Markers. So that's it. On the front, 28 psi, you're looking at 31 psi at the back. These are omnidirectional tires, so you can put them on any wheel, no problem at all. Nice big air vent, not much else to be said. Now, of course, they are mounted on top of the body. Now, I'm going to read from the manual, because I want to make sure I get this right. And it describes the armored car as a whole as follows. The armored car Humber MkIV consists of a hull and turret made of bulletproof nickel chrome molybdenum steel, mounted on a four-wheel chassis. Now, exactly why the operator needs to know the chemical composition of the armor, even remotely, I have absolutely no clue. All you're supposed to know is this will stop small arms, this will stop light cannon, or this will stop big cannon. But apparently somebody wants to know is nickel chrome molybdenum steel. But speaking of armor, you are going to see there is this zigzag of a little bit of additional armor plate just covering where the weld line is. So I'm not sure if that's because they just weren't trusting of the weld, or if there was some other reason that they decided they wanted to do that. Although they are leaf springs, and you'll see them underneath, they do have shocks on all four stations. So the two at the front are exterior, the two at the back are inside the engine compartment. As you start going back, you're going to see the mantlet here for the 37, pistol port, and all sorts of wonderful Pioneer tools, shovel, pick, and there's a protection ring for the turret ring. It's a piece of sheet steel, and you'll see it does have another function a little bit later. Otherwise, there's the side door down here. There's no handle to open it per se, so you need to use a key. And stowage boxes all over the vehicle, basically making best use of space. So one of the minor issues with maintaining this vehicle is that all of the nuts and studs are Whitworth, which I can't say I was particularly familiar with, but apparently they're an entirely different measurement. So this is a 1/2 inch wrench, or spanner, I guess. Note the size of a quarter next to this 1/2 inch wrench. This ain't a 1/2 inch. So it's measured on the inside of the actual stud itself. So just one more problem. But apparently you can still buy these things because this looks like a nice new chrome vanadium spanner. So as you get closer to the back, well, more stowage here with the wrenches. External fire extinguisher, there's one on the other side as well. This is a handheld. It doesn't mount directly inside to extinguish a fire automatically by pulling a button or anything else like that. And a water can. Now this water can has been slightly modified to be also an expansion can for the radiator. Okay, all good. Jack. And then you get to the camo net. And credit to the lads. And when I said that they put this thing pretty much as good as field spec as possible, this is a British camo net that they have in here. It covers the whole vehicle, brown and looks like light tan, unless that's dirt or something like that, perhaps. But very, very small holes for you to stick your twigs or leaves or anything else you want to put on that. But it all folds up very nicely into this cabinet above the engine with the Allied star on the top. As you come around the back, you're going to see the unit markings. Now, this vehicle in its service time in World War II actually was part of 15th Division, the Scottish Lions. And in a strange piece of rationality for the British Army, the reconnaissance regiment was called the 15th Recce. Almost never happens. One note I will say under here is this notch is for the traditional hand crank. However, because they've made 1 or 2 changes on the inside for the restoration purposes, you can't use it as a hand crank. But no harm. Armored radiator, and then we get to, I guess it's a flimsy. It is a rectangular petrol can. And unlike the masterful jerry can, it has a single angled handle here, a nozzle on the corner, and, well, I mean, you can only carry one of these at a time in a hand. It's not all that big. I mean, once they saw the German can and they realized, yeah, the Germans have this figured out, you can imagine what the reaction was in the UK. Little small tail light here, again, towing hook, and you come to the right hand side of the vehicle with yet again another external fire extinguisher. Ooh. Back in the day, British armored vehicles did not have a boiling vessel. They did, however, have some cooking kit. And what we have here is what is in effect a saucepan and frying pan all in once. So you can fry your rashers, boil your soup or your beans or whatever it is that you're having that day. And you would place them on top of the burner or stove. I'll come back to that. But the stove is this little bloke here. Open the lid, and you can see the burner. So pretty much any British vehicle you would find the room or the space to have this thing. For your tea, for your beans, for your soup, for whatever else, your stew that you are being fed. On the right hand side, a spare tire. Now there is actually a door built into this thing. So when they were building the bodies on the manufacturing, they just went, okay, well it says we're going to have a door here, so we're going to build a door here. Of course, with the tire mounted, you cannot open the door. In fact, it's been welded shut. Now, in theory, if you wish to sacrifice the left-hand side door as well, you could mount 2 wheels, but apparently most guys thought better of it. especially if you're trying to get into the driver's hole. But anyway, further forward, typical British Army padlock, the catch with the British lock, and it's actually weather protected by a small little shield, is that they are numbered by lock, which could be an issue if you have to get something out of your platoon mate's vehicle and it is locked. So before you go into combat, don't forget to unlock all the stuff so that you can access it when you need it. And I don't know what the fee was if you should lose your key, but of course there's always the master key option. Bolt cutters. Okay, so we got the handle for the pick that was on the far side and a pry bar, which of course I would call a tanker bar, but this isn't a tank and this isn't American. And finally, this long tan tube actually contains the radio antennae. So, I mean, they're thin little things, you can see, which would mount up on the right rear corner of the turret. So the next thing to do is open up the engine deck, and I'm not going to do it because it's a two-man lift, and the guys who know what they're doing and are also dressed for it, they're doing the lift. Powering all this is an inline side valve 6-cylinder water-cooled petrol engine. Puts out about 90 horsepower at 3,400 RPM. And as you can imagine, it's all very simple World War II technology, early World War II, with a big air filter here, carburetors, other items that you're going to see in here. You have your struts for the rear suspension are in here. Spare oil and lubricants, one for pouring, one just spare oil. There's a dipstick on the far side. 25-gallon Imperial, of course not US, gallon petrol tank on the left. And an interesting little item down here. This is a hydraulic jack that is controlled from the driver's position. We'll show it to you a little bit later. But in order for the driver to see in reverse, officially, what happens is this little door at the back here gets opened. The driver pumps the jack a little bit. That will release this latch and then raise the engine cover up just enough that it can see through this slit here and directly see where they're going. Now, in reality, what they have done is cheated a little bit, because if you look very carefully at the lower right hand corner, you will see a rear view camera. It's a heck of a lot safer in a modern environment. And of course, the radiator and fan at the back. Now, although this is 99% original, the radiator, they did kind of change a little bit, but it's a case of, well, where do you go and get spare Humber parts these days? So sometimes you just have to make do, but most of this is actually original. Also barely visible at the back of the vehicle, you're going to see a big white horizontal bar. Now the upper body was attached to the lower body on 4 basically floating points. So there was a little bit of a suspension effect in addition to the actual leaf springs underneath the vehicle, just to reduce the vibrations that are going through the hull to everything inside. If you were to lie down on the grass, as I have done with the B-roll, and looked up underneath, you're going to see how the powertrain works. So the shaft comes from the engine at the back. There's a transfer case right in the middle. And then there are 2 shafts that go forwards and aft to the differentials on the 2 axles. Actually pretty simple. Up top, we think this is a bracket for mounting a pintle for a Bren for AA purposes. There is a spotlight here which could be manually traversed. And then because it is a recon car, they have smoke grenades for getting yourself out of trouble. Right, that's pretty much it for the outside. Let's open up the doors and see what it's like inside. No, it's just my eternal nemesis is audio, and everything I just recorded didn't record.
Oh, quarter.
That's why I've taken to actually checking this thing relatively routinely.
No, okay. You need to get the audio mic closer.
No, I just hadn't pressed record.
Oh!
And finally, underneath we have a thing. What is this thing?
That is, I believe, the antennas.
Oh, that would make sense.
I believe so. You can just, yeah, there you go. Does it look like it?
Yep, they are indeed antennae.